And if you're thinking, am I crazy to work beyond the age of 65, then you're not even contemplating the possible options of what this, next phase might look like. Even though we're living so much longer, we're living so much healthier, and we really can work for a longer time, many of us have just bought into this notion that we're too old. It's such a great thing to question your assumptions, because when we don't question them, we get stuck in really old modes of thinking. There are options and there are possibilities of working beyond the age of 65, but you have to have that discussion with your employer. One of the things that will make you attractive to your employer is that you're not only interested in staying, but you're interested in mentoring and teaching the next generation. So I think phased retirement is just a phenomenal way to move into this next stage of development if you're thinking about retirement.
3, 2, 1, liftoff. We have a liftoff. Tower cleared.
We got a roll program.
If you are older and you are trying to find a job, keep your job and still advance your career or even change careers, you are undoubtedly running across some form of ageism and certainly misconceptions and misperceptions. Well, in this Boomercast, Dr. Gillian Leithman can offer you some really practical insights and tools with how to succeed. Now, Jill has been a professor at Concordia University in Montreal, Canada. She's a researcher, she is a consultant, she is a speaker on basically the challenges, opportunities, and needs of older workers. And in this Boomercast, she is going to help you get out of your box, get out of your box, and into the box that exists today. And it's a box that is full of opportunities. Let's start, first of all, with those people who want to keep their jobs that they have now, or even advance in them, but are concerned about ageism. I've had several of them say to me, am I crazy for wanting to keep working beyond retirement age? I mean, what do you think? Are they crazy for wanting that?
No, I think maybe we're crazy that we are considering retiring at 65 if we love what we're doing and we're healthy and we, could continue to work. I think I would reframe that question. Why do you want to leave your job if you really like what you do?
What kinds of trends are you seeing? Are a lot of people starting to work past retirement age?
So that's we would expect that they would be. But a lot of people actually retire before 65 for various reasons. And I think there are a multitude of reasons, but I think one of the reasons is that people are just not recognizing that there are options and there are possibilities of working beyond the age of 65, but you have to have that discussion with your employer. Your employer needs to know that you do want to remain in the workforce past 65, and you obviously need to be, you need to make sure that your skills have been kept up to par, right? That you're marketable, that you have what it takes to, to continue working, and you have marketable skills for the 21st century.
So let's say I believe that I have those skills, that I believe that I have something to offer. Nevertheless, you do hear a lot of people saying, I start getting overtones. I hear about other people that have basically been saying, oh, hey, time to go. What should employees be doing to help assure that there's a place for them and that their leadership, their HR partners recognize that?
Again, I would, because it's a bizarre thing. We're not speaking about it. It's really this weird thing that we don't talk about. And I would say, make sure that your organization knows that you're interested in staying. And one of the things that will make you attractive to your employer is that you're not only interested in staying, but you're interested in mentoring and teaching the next generation or the up and comers or the people that are going to assume your role. So that makes you very attractive from the perspective of retention. I want to keep you, especially if you do have what to contribute to the organization and you are interested in sharing your knowledge. So have those conversations, because for some reason they're just not happening. and I would take it upon myself, initiate. You need to become proactive today. All of us do. It's not just boomers, but, really be proactive about this next stage and show that you talk about it, that you want to stay on, you want to, remain connected. You want to, you want to either continue working in the same capacity, or you might want to conceptualize working in a different way. What does that look like to you? Do you want to work 3 days? Do you want to work on special projects? Have some idea of what you want going forward prior to actually having these conversations with HR, because you can actually come to them with a plan if they don't have one for their, I should say, retirees, or it's not retirees, for their older workers. Sometimes organizations will have a phased retirement plan. Oftentimes they won't, because it's relatively new. So think about what it is that you want moving forward. What kind of employment contract do you want to have with your organization?
Now go into phased retirement, because that strikes me as being a new trend and probably one that's still evolving. But in principle, what is it, and what's the best path forward for the employee?
So I think phased retirement is just a phenomenal way to move into this next stage of development if you're thinking about retirement, and you're ambivalent, let's say, about it. You're not so sure. Do I want to stay? Do I want to go? I still have a lot to contribute, but maybe they want me to leave. Phased retirement allows you to cut back on work in different capacities. So you might choose to cut back on your responsibilities and work 3 days a week. You might choose to just work on special projects if it's feasible. It obviously depends upon what type of work you do. So it's really, think of it as scaling back. It might even involve working from home several days a week as opposed to working 5 days from the office. So it's just reorganizing your work week. And it's a reduced work week, or as I said, it could be reduced workload. You might be working on projects that really excite you and not all projects. So you're phasing into retirement. You're leaving, it's a bridge almost between full-time work and part-time work, right? You're bridging it. And instead of looking at this arena as very black and white, should I stay, should I go? You could stay just in a different capacity and get the opportunity to kind of, put your toes in the water about this whole retirement thing.
I know in another conversation that we had, you were talking about, maybe training and learning things don't get offered to you anymore because there's an assumption that, well, you've got one foot out the door.
Yeah, it's such a great point. So it's almost this loop that happens, right? So if I'm HR and I think that you're on your way out, then the natural assumption would be you don't want to invest in your career because, you're not going to go to a conference, learn new skills and come back and apply them, or take a course or do a program. If you're thinking, if you're getting ready to retire. So HR won't offer you training and development opportunities and professional opportunities to advance your career because the assumption is you don't want to. And for whatever reason, mature workers don't approach HR and say, I really am interested in furthering my career. And so nothing happens. We don't offer our older workers the opportunities to advance, and they're not asking us for that opportunity. So it comes back to, let's have this conversation, tell them you're interested, take the initiative, be proactive. And I would even go as far as to say, Paul, if your organization is not interested in investing in your professional development, I think it's worth you investing in your professional development. Meaning maybe you need to foot the bill to upskill. Maybe you need to pay for that conference that you really want to go to, that your employer says, well, we're just not going to invest in it. Just because you need to be proactive at this stage. If you want to remain at work, you need to sell yourself to either your current employer or a potential employer.
That's a very good point. And to be effective, we all need to keep learning. To be healthy, to live and live longer, we need to keep learning, which is more expansive than just training. And so the question I'm coming up to is that what might some of those things be, in that I can imagine some of my clients, for instance, in my other business, thinking it's change processes, it's these technical things, how to operate a certain new kind of CRM software or something like that. But this is other things, including
for lack of a better term, soft skills as well that's worth learning to enhance yourself and your how attractive you are as an employee?
I think we all need to learn. Obviously, clearly I'm biased. I teach soft skills, right? So I think we all, it is to, it's only to our advantage to learn how to use these people skills, right? How to be effective, how to be influential, how to teach. Because just because you have a lot of experience doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be a good mentor. Right. So it behooves us to actually, figure out how to do this. How do I, what would be the best and most effective way to transfer my knowledge? If you struggle with your moods and your emotions, you might want to take a course on emotional intelligence, right? How do I navigate through transitional times? How do I navigate, how do I keep my emotions in check? Things of that nature. So certainly the soft skills part, which the advantage that older workers often have, obviously speaking in gross generalities, but older workers often, I guess by trial and error, they have figured out the soft skill thing, that they tend to have better or higher, I should say, emotional intelligence, better communication skills than their younger counterparts, which make them incredibly attractive to potential employers or their current employer. I would say technology is one of those things that you really need to be up to date on, because most of us in doing knowledge work, we are working with different technologies, and we need to be up to date on that. It's not just for younger workers. If you want to remain attractive, make sure that you're up to date on the latest technologies in your field.
And I would also think that I know in my own case, some things that I think I even have a good track record at doing. I notice that sometimes even if it's listening to somebody like you, I realize, you know what, maybe I need to refresh those skills. Maybe I need to clean out some bad habits, and I've been going on an assumption that I've got this baby nailed, which I might not anymore.
The beauty of that and questioning our assumptions, which is just everything we're talking about, right? We're questioning these assumptions. Like, should I, am I crazy to contemplate, working beyond 65? It's such a great thing to question your assumptions, because when we don't question them, we get stuck in really old modes of thinking, right? And we also want to be looking, if we tend to have the same thoughts, think the same thing over and over again. And if you're thinking, am I crazy to work beyond the age of 65, then you're not even contemplating the possible options of what this, next phase might look like. So questioning assumptions, I think it's something we should all be doing throughout our life. Am I seeing clearly? Is there something? Where's my blind spot? Right? What am I not seeing? And I would say also go out and look for people, role models who are doing this. There are people that are working beyond the age of 65. They're having fun. They're doing it. They're at the height of their career. So there are people that do model these things for us. Don't just look at the people who have exited and think to yourself, well, everybody's, retiring. No, it's just you're looking at the people who are retiring, but there's a whole segment that isn't. So I think questioning your assumptions is just a great thing to do at any age.
You told me that some of the most ageist people out there, and so this applies to our whole audience, some of the most ageist people out there are people of age. They're baby boomers themselves who are ageist. Elaborate on that.
Yeah, so wouldn't conceive of ourselves as like that, but a lot of us tend to internalize these messages that the greater culture has, for lack of better words, has put out there, right? It's the media. It's the societal messages that we get that, even though we're living so much longer, we're living so much healthier, and we really can work for a longer time. Many of us have just bought into this notion that we're too old, and we don't realize we've done it. But that's where your initial question comes from, right? Am I crazy to be contemplating working beyond the age of 65? Well, that's because you may have internalized this belief that you're too old to remain at work. And without even recognizing it, we ourselves, it's called internalized ageism. We fall prey to these false assumptions that maybe there was a time where that was accurate, but those assumptions, those beliefs do not hold today. And so, again, question, where does that come from? 65 comes from way back when we instituted Social Security. It all started, in Germany. The Canada and the States followed suit with 65, but it was chosen as a number. It wasn't arbitrary. It was chosen because most people were not anticipated to live beyond the age of 65, so the state would not have to pay out a pension, right? Well, today, longevity, you can anticipate living to 78, 80, and beyond. That's just average numbers, right? Average lifespan. Doesn't reflect our abilities in the 21st century.
Right, and it's not just the lifespan, but it's the health span, because it's not growing older and being infirm and being in a nursing home. And you're right. I mean, now there are people who are peaking in their lives, and it's happened throughout history, but especially happening now in their 80s. And as boomers broke down the barriers of business and growth and employment back in the 60s, it's like reap the benefits of it and keep working, keep contributing and such. And the thought also came into my mind and I've heard and studied it too, about how 65 came up back in 1935 when that was the average lifespan for the American male. And take somebody from 1935 at age 65 and put them in right now, and you'd probably think that you're looking at someone who's old and infirm, not the average 65-year-old or the average healthy 65-year-old today.
Right. And it leads me to think about a story, an example that one of my PhD supervisors would often speak about. And she was Dolores Pushkar, heavy hitter in the field of aging. She'd often say, take 10 babies, infants, and line them up. And they're pretty much all the same developmentally. There'll be very little variation on the theme. Take 10 65-year-olds and line them up, and you are going to have people that are walking with canes, maybe some that are in wheelchairs, some that may have dementia, and others that are at the height of their game, that are running marathons, that are climbing mountains. So age should not be taken as a barometer for your capabilities. It's your life stage. It's your health phase. How do you feel? Right? Age is this arbitrary, don't take age as the guiding post as to what you should be, doing and where you should be at in life, because it doesn't fit today. There was a time where it fit. It made sense when we went to school, we got jobs, and we retired. But we don't live like that anymore. We go to school for much longer. We take sabbaticals. We go to work. We exit work. Even if you are getting ready to leave the workforce, you might be thinking about starting your own business at 65. Right? So I would say, going back to your previous question, question your assumptions. Because
these are self-limiting beliefs, as you usually characterize them.
These are self-limiting beliefs, and in the worst way possible. If you start thinking, I'm not capable, I'm too old, that is going to reinforce what you choose to engage in, the activities that you try, whether or not you're even contemplating working beyond 65, and it could become a downward spiral, right? I'm too old to start cycling. I'm too old to play tennis. I'm too old to climb a mountain, start a business. Yeah. And you are the one that's going to be limiting your beliefs. So, and you probably will search for evidence in the environment to support your beliefs. So you'll be listening to your entourage that says you should retire. You need to rest. You should be. This is your time. This is your period of. This is your period where it's all about you. This is why you worked your whole life. Well, maybe you want to continue working. Yeah. So search for evidence to the contrary. Who are the people in your world or in your community that are working beyond 65? Who are the people who are starting businesses? There's a whole movement of 65-year-olds that are starting new businesses that happen to be more successful than their younger counterparts because of their experience. So I would say question your beliefs and look for evidence. Look for people who are share the same mindset. That 65 is just a number.
In terms of startups, boomers outpace millennials by 2-to-1 margin. And as you mentioned, most of the ones that are done by boomers succeed. But with self-limiting beliefs, they're very often self-fulfilled prophecies. And I love what Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Genius.
Yeah.
Right. And so I want to just mention, that's why it's so important, websites like ProBoomer, and movements of the like. It's so important to surround yourself by people who think like you, because unfortunately, we're still very much so an ageist society, and we haven't caught up to, the longevity revolution, the way we're living our culture, our cultural messages have just not caught up to our new realities. So hang out with people who are questioning these things, who really think that these ideas are dated, because they are the ones that are going to mirror back to you these new values of, you totally could do this, it's feasible. Look at Jim, he's climbing Everest at 65. Then look at, Nancy, she's cycling at, 60. She's taking up this new hobby. So there are people doing this stuff. You don't have to go at it alone. Seek out those role models, because that will be very validating and also, exciting for you to mirror. There are people doing these things. You become part of the movement.
Well, and we are the average of the people that we hang out with.
Absolutely.
And, job hunters, in terms of what can I do to overcome that ageist perspective, which so many people just automatically have. It's a stereotype. It's 180 degrees from the truth. But what can I do in terms of making myself employable, not just based on my skills and experience, which in some cases just isn't enough if people perceive you as being, older. Do I educate? Do I have to educate that hiring manager? Do I have to, in my resume and other ways that I put myself forth, educate, deal with the elephant in the room? What do I do?
Yeah, well, I would say act, like educating. In other words, act. Tell people what you're capable of. Tell people what you've done. I would be looking for jobs with employers who, we do have markings of employers who aren't ageist, employers that are 50, that are age friendly. Look at the language that they're actually using to advertise their job. Do they talk about diversity and inclusion? Do they show you images of the different generations? So you want to be looking for that, because you're going to be an easier sell to the employers who recognize that age is an asset. And you also, in your language, want to be talking about, you're a team player. You work with different generations. You like working with different generations. So you yourself also have to be cognizant of your language and what you bring to the table. And which this is one that people do not like to, they just don't like to contemplate. But the realities are such, sometimes you really do need to shift your expectations. And you might have to do an internship. If you might have to prove to the employer that you do have what it takes to be part of their organization. It might be an unpaid internship, but get experience, especially if you're transitioning into a different industry. That's not necessarily a bad thing. There's so many things that you could gain from being part of an organization, learning new things, learning different cultures. And I would say, you need to be agile. What we would say today, emotionally agile, adaptive. This concept might be hurting your sense of pride. Try and put your ego aside. A paycheck is a paycheck is a paycheck. Money is green, right? And so what do you do? It might be a new learning curve. You might have to learn these new skills. And when you start out, you might have to do these things like take an internship, sit on boards, volunteer. In other words, expand your network. If you're having difficulty finding a job, expand your network. We have a tendency of being very insular with our networks. Expand them in different, they shouldn't be insular. You should be looking to expand them in different industries, hanging out with different people, getting to know different people, because they have access to different networks, different opportunities.
So you brought up a couple of interesting points I want to dive back into. So first of all, let's talk about internships, because that is intriguing. That is something that I'm sure a lot of people watching this, like, I never even thought of that. Wait a minute, are you kidding? I'm going to go get coffee for somebody. Although most internships now are much more involved in that. I mean, how much of that is like the Robert De Niro movie, The Intern, in which he's the older worker that comes into a fashion high-tech startup and has a great impact and fulfillment out of it?
I'm hearing more and more that honestly, that the Robert De Niro's, like these do exist. And I guess, and what I love about that movie, and I really love that movie. What I love about it is just his attitude, you know, this attitude of a desire to learn, a desire to be open. If we have this attitude that I know what all I need to know, you're not going to learn, you're not going to grow. And that's not really attractive to anybody, or certainly no employer, right? If you have this attitude that I'm willing, that I want to expand my repertoire, that's all it is. You want to expand. Think of yourself as an elastic almost. I often tell people, I'm not asking you to change yourself, but you want to expand who you are maybe. Try on a different persona, a new skill set. You know, have fun with it. We don't have to be so serious about this, right? So if you approach it if you could leave your ego aside and say, hey, you know what? I don't know much about this industry, but I'm willing to learn. Well, that's an attractive quality in any potential employee.
I was thinking, you know, that could really be a fun, growth, interesting, invigorating experience doing something like that.
Yeah.
And who knows where it would lead? The potential seems to be huge.
And again, it comes back to what we were saying before, is those self-limiting beliefs. Well, I'm not going to do that, or I know what I know, or I've climbed so far in my career that I'm not going to go start at the bottom in another industry. Well, certainly if you're going to approach it that way, it's going to seem really unattractive, right? But if you could be playful with it and, you know, really think through, you know, the potential, we call them possible selves. What else can I do? What else do I want to do? Try it on. You might not like it. You might love it. You might come into contact with new ideas and new ways of doing things that you never imagined, that is so invigorating. Mm-hmm. You know, and then it's so exciting that you want to come to work, you want to contribute. And for some of us, if you're in a lucky position, then the paycheck really, it's not the number one motivating factor, but it's actually being part of this really fun, stimulating environment that you want to contribute to and learn from and be part
and
of.
Again, you never know where it leads. We have to remember, you know, I'll put forth the fact, as I tell my two 20-something sons, you know, that you know, in this day and age, there's so many possibilities. There are no rules anymore, and you never know how one thing will begat another and put you on a path. And I also think about that book that came out a number of years ago, just came to mind. I can't get the title exactly right, but it was How Starbucks Saved My Life. And it was about the top ad executive who got let go because of his age, could find nothing, and ended up being a barista at a Starbucks and living in this little apartment and everything. And it talked about how it transformed him for the better in his overall life, as well as the opportunities that it led to. It was absolutely brilliant. I think it came out 6 or 7 years ago.
I'll have to take a look at that. It sounds like a fascinating story, but it leads me to think about this idea of identity and transformation. What gets us stuck? What gets us really stuck and I guess fearful of pursuing new opportunities? We get stuck with in this concept of I was a banker, I was a teacher, I was a professor, I was a filmmaker, and when we look at transitions and the possibilities of what could be, we can get very scared about what that might look like, because we're so identified with who we were in our professional careers. If you approach it from a very different way, from a playful way of, I was a banker, but I don't know, maybe I could be a creative, you know, maybe I'm interested in film. It's not as scary. Right. And it just means, well, you need to learn a new skill set in order to become that filmmaker, in order to become that producer. But it's certainly possible.
I like how you leave that open. And you're right. When you broaden your expectations and you let go of specific ones, it is immensely freeing. And it puts you in greater opportunity of finding something. How do I present myself? I mean, we've kind of touched on this, and this is in either case of whether I'm trying to keep my job or advance or find a job. Not to give you too much of a range, I guess with that said, naturally I'm going to, it's everything from, people are like, gosh, I don't even know how to dress to go for an interview. And I don't know how hip I should, you hear about people sitting in the parking lots of the company where they're going to interview to see what people are wearing. But of course, these are people who are 27 years old, which may not look right on me, but also, how much do I own it and say, hey, here's who I am, and this is generational? And how much do I say, I can adapt, I can play foosball?
I think that's such a great question. And I think what gets us stuck is that we say things like, well, that if I try on that outfit, that is so inherently not me, I can't wear that. That obviously it needs to be age appropriate. But you would never show up to Google in a 3-piece suit, right? If you were interviewing for Google, you would never show up at an Ernst & Young dressed as if you were going to work at Google. Right. So the idea is to become cognizant. I love that idea of, become an investigator. What are people wearing? So you might not be, maybe you're not going to wear the t-shirt if you're an older individual, the t-shirt and the ripped jeans, but maybe you are showing up to that interview in, jeans and a shirt, right? That may you fit that you're not, in other words, you don't want to stand out entirely from that culture. There has to be something, there should be, think about what's similar, what similarities do we share? And dress appropriately, I think that's really important, like age appropriately, but again, have fun with it, right? Yep. Have fun with it. And if you're feeling like this is, because the problem with this is not me, that gets us stuck. This is not me. Well, of course it's not you, because you're learning to be somebody else, or to try on, let's say that you're learning to try on different things. It's going to feel weird at the beginning. It's supposed to. If we go back to the whole concept of learning, we go to school or we learn on the job, and learning by nature is spontaneous. It's uncomfortable. We haven't mastered these skills, so they don't feel like us. But fake it till you become it, right? Try again, be playful, try on these things. If you're like, I've never gone to work in jeans, but that's what the culture, it looks like. If you show up so radically different, you're not going to fit in.
Right. Or somebody wearing baggy jeans for the sake of wearing jeans, and then you really do look awful. I'll share a trick that I did, and that is that especially coming in as a so-called creative type in the other kind of content creation business that I was in, and people are expecting me to be 33 years old. But I don't want to try to look like trying to look like I'm 33 years old. I took everything and just upped it a level. So for instance, you talked about a t-shirt. Well, you can go out and get a very high quality, well-fitting t-shirt and wear it under a casual kind of sports jacket, right, sports coat. And you can, instead of wearing blue jeans, you can get, like I used to like 508s, they don't make them anymore, but well-fitting blue jean material, but you can get them in khaki, you can get them in gray, you can get them in black, and then something like a chukka boot, that has a nice look to it, but it's still casual.
Right.
Well, you've upped your wardrobe a little bit. It is a business interview. I still believe in the thing that always dress a little bit higher than you think is required.
Absolutely.
But you're still, you're acquiescing in a positive way to the context of.
You're adapting.
Adapting.
Right? It's adapting. It's not even like you're acquiescing, is you're adapting, right? And you need to, let's be honest here. We all do. It doesn't matter how old you are. We need to play a part. If you want to belong to a certain culture, organizational culture, you need to play a part. It's just, you need to figure out, what does that part look like? Dress is part of it. Dress is a huge part of it. So can you just walk us through a little bit of what that felt like for you? Like actually going about upping, your wardrobe. Can you talk a little bit about that?
You know what? It made me feel great, because in the first place, I felt good in it. I felt appropriate in it. And I thought, in relative terms, but at least to me, I'm like, I own this. Yeah, I feel great, and I love the snug fitting jeans, and I'm like, yeah, I was comfortable with it, and quite frankly, it made me feel what I was trying to represent, which is what I am.
which probably made you feel confident, right?
Oh,
Confident
hugely confident.
to walk in
Oh,
there.
my
And
shoulders are back a little bit more, and yeah, I'm owning it. I'm owning it. Yeah.
and that's what you want to do. You want to give them the opportunity to see you shine, and so these little tweaks, and that's what they are, tiny tweaks, right? They go a long way. And the first thing, unfortunately, like it or not like it, people are going to judge you based on what you look like. And so stack the cards in your favor. What does that image need to look like? Right? We're not talking anything extreme here, but we're talking dress. Well, dress is an easy one to change. It really, really is. So, and I love that you remarked, like, it sounds to me like, going back to what we were saying before, be playful with it. Have fun with it.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
It doesn't have to be so scary.
There is so much more on this topic, so much more that you have to offer. And, we've done another podcast with this kind of content directed at HR people. There's a lot more in terms of blogs and interviews coming up in the future with Jill. Before I ask you my last question, what's the best way for people to connect with you or seek out more from you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, GillianLeithman.com. I have a website, Rewire2retire.com. I'd love hearing from people, hearing about HR as well as employees, what's going on in your world. Talk to us. We want to know. I want to know what your challenges are, and what your greatest accomplishments are.
And there's a book in the works.
There's a book in the works. Yes.
So with all of this said, for boomers' employment situations, the multitude of them, what do you think is the number one takeaway? What is the number one critical thing to leave us thinking?
It's so difficult to boil it down to one thing, right? But I guess if we are to carry through with, on the thread of this conversation, it would be challenge your assumptions. Are you carrying around those self-limiting beliefs? Because it might be you that is your own worst enemy, right? And so challenge those assumptions and seek out models that have done it differently. And that's the really cool part about being this age today, is because there are such great models. There are people out there doing amazing things at 65, at 70, at 80. So I would say challenge your beliefs and seek out evidence. I'm not asking you to believe something that isn't true. Seek out evidence to support these beliefs. I'm saying, people are really doing it differently today. Seek out those people who are doing it different.
Now, Jill and I did another Boomercast, same general topic, but focused at the people who do the hiring, HR, hiring managers, bosses, owners, whatever. And it's even worth it if you're looking for a job or trying to advance your career or whatever, for even you to watch it, because it will also give you insight and other ideas that we didn't cover in this Boomercast that will help you succeed at what you're going after.